judicial, and legislative. Okay. What does the executive branch of the said government do in the United States? What do those levels do? Local, state, or federal? What do they do?
Carry out the law.
Execute. You see it. Execute. So you have offices like president, sheriff,
Administrator.
all right, exact governor, all right. Judicial branch.
Write the law.
Interpret. Now only one person is raising their hand. All right. Last one. Interpret the law. So we got an interpretation going on. No, yeah, but get into it. This is what the natural order was in the genesis of the organic law, and we'll just call that because we got to learn some vocabulary. De jure, right, which means lawful of law, and legislative is what?
Create. Make law.
All right, rights, right, or rights, something. They're writing something. All right, so we got enforcement, we got interpretation, and we got right. This is called balancing powers, the balance of powers. Balance of powers is, since the executive is enforcing, they're not supposed to be right. Since the judicial is interpreting, they're not supposed to be enforcing, nor are they supposed to be writing, except to comment on what's already written, based on something that is a foundation. And the foundation being common law practices and the supreme law of the land, which is, anybody know? Supreme law of the land, I'm going to call on people now, just test it.
That's the Constitution.
Don't call it out loud, I'm going to call on people. We're going to test it. All right? So the Constitution is supposed to be the supreme law of the land. What else is supposed to be the supreme law of the land?
Treaty.
Brother,
The treaty.
get sued.
Oh,
Treaties. All right. Treaties. Treaties. What is a treaty? Brother William.
Treaty is agreement between two parties to be able to basically do commerce with one another, or do business together.
Okay. Parties? Like
Two nations.
Nations make treaties. All right? So you got the Constitution, then you have treaties, which are between nations. So the Constitution incorporates an international law format. All right? And that is in what clause of the Constitution? Anybody? What clause of the Constitution actually implements that international type of interface? Article, 7 articles, so which one? 6. Article 6. Good. Article 6 is called what? All right. Now why is this important? See, because at home, anywhere, in conversation, you should be able to have that conversation. You should be able to run it down real quick, have that conversation, and that means that at least you know what others don't know about the United States of America. Average person in the United States of America cannot have that conversation. You can have a conversation about the 3 branches of government, what they are, the balance of powers, and how the domestic nation makes international interface. Therefore, there can't be any accountability. When people are ignorant. Ignorance is the disease that's causing all these problems. All right? Why am I saying that? Because if, this is the allegation to most people, I'm not speaking to people in arm necessarily, but I'm speaking to people in general. If the Constitution is the bedrock of where you allegedly have your political rights, which secure and guarantee your natural rights, and you don't know it, shall we proceed with stop and frisk? Assume the position? All right? Now, why are people not interested in those things? A lot of reasons why. Same reason why they're interested in eating a piece of chicken after they leave it, even though we tell them whatever. Human beings have their own willpower, and they can do whatever they want. And no one can tell them to do anything except by force when they're savage. So let's look at that. Willpower. Now, yesterday I went into a very rare area of Islamic and Moorish history. When we come into these classes, we deal with 2 jurisdictions. In history, or heritage base, we deal with the indigenous jurisdictions of the Americas, which is a very rare subject, where we are discussing the so-called African American and the reality of the heritage that is embedded in America's ancient past, and them having two things in that past. Just sanguinity. What's just sanguinity? Raise your hand and I'll call it. Just sanguinity. Somebody who's been in class before, you should know this. Just like that. Of the blood. Yes, right. Rights by bloodlines. Rights by bloodline. All right? That's rights by bloodline. Which means whoever your mother and your father, your mother and your father, your mother and your father, your great, 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 they pass down to you everything. Tradition, heritage, contracts, all kinds of inherit, everything. All right? So if you say you're an African American, you're automatically admitting that your inheritance is slavery. By default. That's your inheritance. Because if there is no name or contact of identity prior to that particular point, then you're not inheriting anything prior to that particular point. Your genesis of inheritance is the transatlantic slave trade happened, people got caught up and snatched and kidnapped and whatever, and now my inheritance is slavery. Or my inheritance is slavery and whatever white folks gave us after slavery, because in slavery, generally speaking, the so-called captive was not a property owner, generally speaking. If they did get something, if they were manumitted, you ever heard that word? Manumitted?
Manumitted.
Manumission. What's manumission? Manumission is the act of the slave master who bonded the slave giving permission to the slave to be free. That's the manumission. All right? Manumission. All right, so if you got manumitted, then he could give you some animals, some livestock, maybe a little parcel of land or something, and you got manumitted. So as African Americans, that's the identity crisis that you're in. We wrote a whole book on this. I don't have a book tonight, but we wrote a book on the identity crisis. Now, this is not our subject tonight, but we have to touch on it so you can see it. So this is one area. The other area that is very, very important for us to understand is what exactly happened to our people in West Africa. Not with suppositions, not with any of the things that we would like to make up. We make up a lot of stuff. How did millions of people get taken from Africa and brought to America in a world that was pretty public? I mean, you can send mail during that time. You can do a lot of things. You can communicate across continents. All right? There were no airplanes being used at that point in the common sense, so, things were a little bit slower in that sense, but there was a lot of community. There were banks. You could write a check during that time period. All right? So it wasn't just some kind of jungle Tarzan kind of operation. What happened in West Africa where you had millions of people being sold to other people? How did that happen? It's presented in the wrong way to you. The issue is very simple, and we're dealing with this: war. That's it. All right. Without bringing this factor in, we make Europeans look like Supermen. And that's not the case. Right? So we can write down their little jurisdictions that they were in. Let's say Portugal. Let's say Spain. Let's say France. Let's say the Dutch. German Jews. All right? Let's say the British. All right? Those are the main key parties. There are others. These groups of people, all right, decided to ally with other groups of people against a specific nationality of people. There's no way to get around this in West Africa. in West Africa, like I can name some kingdoms. Oyo, Putoja. All right. These were two kingdoms that were in West Africa. What was the nationality of the people in the kingdoms? That's the question. So if you were in the Oyo kingdom, what was your nationality? What was you? Huh? Igbo? You said Igbo? I won't put that. You had certain clans there. The Oyo kingdom, they had systems there, but the Ifa? Yeah, exactly. That's the tradition that was there. And in Putojawa, you had a Moorish kingdom. All right. Okay. You could go to other places. You could go to the Jolo. All right. That's West Africa. All right. Another Moorish kingdom. All right. You could go to Ouida. All right. Ouida is the kingdom now. Now in the kingdom, you had a certain type of setup. In the Oyo kingdom, you had the clan kings and the matriarchy. Okay. And you had a clan of elders. And everything was done based on the system. And then, of course, you had commerce. You had other things going on there, that incorporated into it. And you had the same thing here. In the Moorish kingdoms, you had something called the Diwan. Everybody know what that is? Sometimes called the Diwan. That was a council, kind of like the Senate. But they would be selected into office, and then they would choose who was the colleague. All right, this is West Africa. All right, so you could go through many different empires, Songhai, Mali, all right, Almoravian civilizations. So, I'm saying all this to say, if we understand the political dynamic of West, our people under Africa, we could understand how a war would take place. All right? The war was, Portugal and Spain started it off by allying with the Oyo and the kingdoms of Ouida, who were adverse to these Moorish kingdoms. And the Europeans, of course, have been adverse to these Moorish kingdoms through what?
Crusades.
Crusades. Raise your hand if you ever heard of Crusades. Okay. All right, good. All right. You heard all kinds of stories about the Crusades. What was the genesis or match point of the Crusades? What started the Crusades? What's the issue? Huh?
Christianity.
Say it again?
Christianity.
Ah, there we go. Christianity. And what else? What did they want?
Jerusalem.
They wanted what?
Jerusalem.
All right, they wanted these areas that we know of that they now call the Holy Lands. All right, they wanted Jerusalem. All right, they didn't just want the city of Jerusalem. All right, they wanted that whole area. What was so popular about this area? All right, one. Say it again.
The Nile Valley.
It was the transport center into the Red Sea and into the east. It was a commercial mega point, all right, in the world. North Africa, in that little, right north by the Nile, the Sinai, that whole area was a commercial mega point, geographically speaking. So this is what Carthage and Rome is part. This is what, a punk, all right, Punic civilization. So they're trying to get this area. Now, it is instructional for everybody who is here who claims or has any connection to Africa by genetics, bloodlines, etc., to understand that when we look at chronology of civilization in African history, let's say we start with Kenya, right? Or Tom Mary. Tom Mary had 25 dynasties with 2 interruptions, 3 interruptions, that were pretty much the same bloodlines. All right? After this, groups of people called Assyrian, Persian, which are genetically the same, but empirically a little different. And that's a little, I won't put that there, because that's a challenge. I'll put the Hyksos there just for the sake, but Hyksos weren't primarily of one genetic stock. All right, so I'll put it there. Hyksos, Syrian, Persian, invasions. My point is they were invasions. All the way down to Greco-Roman. The Greco-Roman invasions were the invasions that took most of North Africa and East Africa out of their empirical political systems. All right? Now, I'm giving you this backdrop over there so you can understand it also over here. All right? In the Americas. In the Americas, you had pre-1492 invasions. Most of us learned by Columbus, right? Columbus invading and coming into. All right? But prior to that, you had Nordic races attempting to invade what is now this area. The area that New York is in, Boston, and other areas. As far south as the Caribbean. I have the photos in our book, which I placed in the book, that show the Temple of the Warriors, where these Olmec, black Olmec warriors are arresting these peoples with pretty much pale skin and blonde hair. Where they coming from? All right? So we got to understand the history of invasion. I'm just trying to show you this. Also, the last point we want to make is that in the American jurisdiction, you had this ancient black civilization that's called She, now called Olmec, which we know is a Mande-based language and genetic system. Mande or Mandinka are these tribes. Songhai, Mali, all those different genetic groupings and language groupings. And we have the Islamic and the Moorish heritage here, where there was one king, he's actually the brother of the king, Mansa Musa's brother. Mansa Musa's brother, in the records in Timbuktu, brought 400 ships to this part of the planet. Elephants, all kinds of stuff. All right? So there was a commercial and an interface, constant interface. That's important for us to understand because this gives us a good demographic of ancient America. So if we come here and we see writings, metaneta, ancient Moorish script here, you know what I mean? It gives a better picture of why that is here, prior to Europeans. Right? So now that's still here. The people are still here. We're the people. But we've been denationalized. Now we're over here following this stuff. And now we got to get a better idea of what to follow. Now, this is not my subject, but I wanted to get this down so we can get a picture of what we talk about when we talk about indigenous government. Indigenous government is our ability through self-identification to bring remedy to an international problem. The international problem is black people have no identity. So they have to decide to the rest of the world who we have to decide who we are. No one can tell us that. We can even disagree amongst each other. All right? No one can tell the whole group you have to be this, you have to be that. It's based on group consciousness. If you have a group of people who say, well, I'll agree with that stuff. I'm a Hebrew Israelite. I know, nothing. I ain't indigenous nothing. Okay, good, cool. Can't argue with that. I'm not arguing with what you want to be. That's your self-identification. Part of respect in history is respecting who people are, who they want to be. All right? So whatever somebody wants to be, the purple-green people, whatever they want to be, we have to respect that. All right. Is anybody confused by anything else? Because I'm erase this and change gears. All right, is that clear?
I just need a little bit more clarification on the 5 European nations. What was their composition at the time they were going into Africa, and how did that come about for them to go into Africa and do what they did?
All right, let's start with the Dutch, because they were the first companies. All right, and this is instructional because we're dealing with post bubonic plague. This is big. All right, and you have 2 main jurisdictions inside of Europe. You have the old Roman Empire. This is what they call it. And then you have the German bloodlines under William the Conqueror. All right. The old Roman Empire spread from Germany in Bavaria to Britannia. These are the indigenous civilizations in Europe. These are the descendants of the Roman Republic. The Roman Republic and the old Roman Empire are 2 different things. I'm using Roman because that's the word that's used conventionally in history. But when you study the book, and I give you a good book to study, it's called Ancient and Modern Britons. By David McRitchie. Hit this book, Ancient and Modern Britons. All right. David McRitchie. Why do you want to get this book? Because it gives a good demographic history of what was in ancient Europe. Now, the point of clarification that can make it really simple is you can go online and Google Columbus, Germany. Columbus, Germany. Christopher Columbus, Germany. And on the first page, he tells you that the parties who he's working with, all right, the Euro-Jewish operation that was going on here, had one agenda, and it was to take away the reign of the Moors who were reigning in Europe. That's important. All right? So when you go to the old Roman Empire, and you go to places like Bavaria, and you look at the crest, the family crest, like the last pope who sat himself down, all right? And you look at the crests and the shields that you have, you see all of these blackamoors. And this is the old Roman Empire, from Germany all the way to Britannia. And this is what this book explains. So you have that going on. Then you have over here, William the Conqueror, around 1066, yeah, that is exactly, 1066, I know it was the number. 1066 AD, who brings the Norman tribes out of Germany, conquers most parts of old Germany, and comes into Britannia. And what he does is very important. He changes the literature after conquering certain parts, and he made something called the Doomsday Book. Doomsday. What is the Doomsday Book? The Doomsday Book is a war catalog of family names in Europe. So in order to wipe out this history, he created the Doomsday Book so that white people would have a genesis for surnames. All right? So most of the ancient surnames in Europe, the newer names are just modifications of those, older names. All right, so this is the demographic in Europe. You have more civilizations collapsing via crusades in Europe, and then the extension of Europe at that time after taking over some of those things to attempt to come further down into the Levant or the Middle East, because now they want to go further. They got some control. All right, so post all of this, now you have a genesis of empires, and then they run into the bubonic plague. With the running into the bubonic plague, they had to also go further, go out onto the what? Spice trade. And the spice trade was an attempt to get the pharmacopoeia of the various indigenous civilizations so they could save their race. And some of us even helped them. All right? So the first universities pop up in Spain and other places, and you start seeing, after the bubonic plague, what? Renaissance. Renaissance is a fancy word for Europeans acclimating, specifically acclimating Islamic sciences. That's it. There's no other way to go get around it. All right? So all the doctors who studied in the world, they studied from Avicenna and the other medical pharmacopoeias that were developed in Africa and that led into Spain. Europeans learned how to use forks and spoons and knives and get plates and wash their hands. All right? There's a brother who was a scholar. They call him Blackbird. What's his full name? I forget. Ali Ibn something. And he brought the color sciences and how to set a table, all that stuff. How to take showers. Because the royalty will only take showers once a week. That was royal. Take showers once a week. All right, so they got access to civilization, which is cool. All right, but there's something unique that happened in the 13th century that is the catalyst for how the world is branding right now. Yes.
Secret Treaty of Verona.
No. Well, that's important, but this something. What I'm about to go into right now is way more important, and it might not even seem like it's important. It has everything to do with these people who call themselves Jewish. All right.
Chief.
Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry. Excuse me. I didn't see you.
Based on the information that you're raising right now, one or two books that would actually help get you up to speed to understand West Africa and the situation that we're in right now. One or two books.
Yeah, they got one. One of them is our book, The Lost Aboriginal Heritage of the so-called Negro African American. Now, in this book, you can get this book right at this website. I don't have any copies of it tonight, but 2 days, you can get it to you. If you go to indigenousgovernment.org. All right. And there's a whole bibliography with about 85 books dedicated to the research in this book. So you can go to indigenousgovernment.org and take that book. Anybody, most people have that book. All right, this book dedicates 2 whole chapters with the research from the transatlantic slave trade database, because there's a lot of confusion about the slave trade. So we strove to get records of logs and other things to put into the conversation so we can understand what happened. Because again, there was a political incentive to see the Islamic civilizations, those more civilizations in West Africa plummet. All right? And when we talk about world culture, we talk about Timbuktu and thousands of books and those other things, those were written by your ancestors and they covered everything. However, in the 13th century, in Spain, a group of Ashkenazis got together, and after having access to 600 years of Moorish influence in Spain, they came up with an idea. And the idea was, we have to work to get rid of this thing right here. This has to disappear. We meticulously studied it. If you study, see, this is why we have to have discussions and further certifications. Because if anyone who understands Moorish history and how documents got translated out of the Islamic text and became English text will understand who the Jews are. Because those texts were first translated into Latin. And most of the instructors who were assisting with the translation were Jews, pale Jews, living in Spain under the protection. Because as a people, we talk about democracy today and freedom of religion. That's bull. The only time in our history that people have had the ability to freely practice what they want to is when we ruled. All right? We didn't harass these people. We let them learn our culture. Now, it's instructional to know that this word makes no sense the way it's being used today. It makes absolutely no sense. All right? This is the word that they try to say that it comes from. Yahad. All right? And it's also instructional for us to understand where they began to use this word. All right? It is our point of contention, and it's very easy to prove, that prior to the Roman era of the 1st century AD, white people had no identity except for little political jurisdictions like Greece and other places. They had no tradition. There was no tradition. With the books from Homer and all these other things, these are just copies of African civilization, all right, and bastardizing of it. But the 1st century AD gave Genesis to two groups of people: pale Jews and Christians. They formed ideologies based on our ancient traditions. Prior to that, there were no Jews. If you want to understand the text, you can look up this guy, Flavius Josephus. All right? And then you can look up the Church of Alexandria. This church was born from the Coptic Church, which was an African, it wasn't even a church, all right? It was just a system. And this guy pops up as a Pharisee, and he's primarily studying the Asiatics who were in North and East Africa. And they started a group and started using this term, Yahad. This is the term that's used in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So, why am I going over all this? I'm going back to these Jews, not to become an anti-Semite. Not to pick on Jewish people. But Jewish people figured out, wow, these black people are brilliant. They have one basic system upon which they can branch out and create magic everywhere. When I say magic, I'm talking about institutions running operations. Let me give you a clear mind. Most of us, when we study Moorish history, we think about somebody running around with a scimitar and business. Right. But what we don't know is that when we talk about these Islamic civilizations, we're talking about groups of our ancestors who got together, who studied their more ancient ancestors enough to overthrow the Roman Republic and the Sasanian Empire. That's the structure. When I say overthrow it, some of it turned violent, but most of it was non-violent. In 40 years, they were able, just 40 years, they were able to take back jurisdictions, commerce, family, everything. How in the hell did they do that? We need some instruction on it right now. How did they do that? Here we go. They studied ancient systems of government. That's all they did. That's all they did. They studied the psychosomatics of what had happened to their people in North Africa, East Africa, and Arabia. And they said, wow, our people are in what we call in Islam, Jahiliyyah. Jahiliyyah is a period of ignorance. And Jahiliyyah represented the changing of concepts from the divinity of these empires, Taharqa, Pianki, the divinity, to the Greco-Romans being able to paint a picture that everything with melanin in it is evil. That's what they did. So in doing that and creating a world concept of that in this Roman Empire, our people had to engender a socio-political movement, a psychological movement that would change our people's perception about themselves and get them back into a better operation. Right? They had to sit down and figure out how to do it. So imagine a world ruled by the Romans where you have black people in office. In fact, Rome is just like America. They were so bad, they put Septimius Severus as the head, Oreo, of the Roman Republic. So now we look back and say, hey, Rome was black because Rome had a black head. His name was Septimius Severus. He wasn't nothing but a nigga. Over white people's affairs. That's all it was. So Rome had our ancestors in it, just like we're in America. We're in America right now. We call ourselves African American, but we're neither in that sense. In the truest sense, we know what American means. All right? But what I'm trying to say is, can you see the picture? See, we don't have to romanticize history, because what was happening then is happening now. Same dynamic. All right? You got some pale people who are the minority who took over the majority, and they got them in a certain type of way. But so what did the Moors do? They said, okay, we have to create the socio-political movement to overturn the minds of the people. So they said, okay, we got this literature from our ancestors. It's been all jacked up. They call it the Bible now. We got other stuff that's going on. We're going to form an ideology, and they use this. This is the Holy Word. This was the basis of how, or the message of it, was the basis of how they were able to engender groups to participate in that movement in 40 years to overthrow. So what did they do? Look at the concept now. If white people are ruling, and the Persians, the Sassanians are white, and the Romans are white, and their ideologies are ruling the world, all right? Their gods, their paradigms are ruling. What do our people look like coming and saying that, okay, we're going to come up with an ideology, and the ideology is going to say the original man is Ham. The original man is Ham. Hama Masanun. Hama Masanun is a phrase in Islam to describe Adam and the angels bowing to Adam as Khalifa. Khalifa is one who stands in the place of the Creator to orchestrate the power of the Creator. So imagine in a white Roman world, somebody coming and saying that. That's a problem. That's like Khalid Muhammad, retro 570 AD or whatever. So that's the concept, all right? Going further, the Jews have a system now that they call Kabbalah. You ever heard that? Yeah. All right, that's where I want to go. All right, so original man is out. They have a system called Kabbalah, right? And the only problem with that system is they don't tell you where it comes from. Now, in the system of I'll just put the concepts. In this system, all right, this is supposed to be a system of what? Divination. Everybody know what divination is? Divination is taking the willpower, all right, force of a human being and cultivating it to its highest potential. That's pretty much all you're doing. All right? That's all you're doing. So, in this system of divination, they have hierarchies of how things operate. Let's just put these there. All right? You have the Ein Sof, and the Ein Sof third. All right? And then you have these things called Sephiroth. All right? Spheres of intelligence. Keter. All right? You just keep going. You can go on and go on. And there are 10 Sephiroth. All right? I'm going to draw all of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. At the end, you have Malkuth. Malkuth is the kingdom. All right? Then you up here Keter at the highest levels, and then you have these other higher levels of emanation. All they're studying is the willpower of man and woman and the manifestations of how that willpower or thought are distributed to create kingdom for themselves. Malkuth. Now, this Kabbalah that Jews give to the world, where people are studying the 32 paths and the numbers and the gematria and all that, that's bullshit. That's bullshit.
So what's the good Kabbalah for them?
We want to talk to them. That's bull. That's not divination or magic. Now, just think about it. Jewish family lines worldwide are very wealthy. They're very wealthy, pretty much. And their specialization is creating systemization and then institutions around that so that they can control banking, military science, technology, whatever. All right, they understand that. So how is it that they can go from some little nobodies, all right, to pretty much having influence and control all across the planet? People actually think that they're sitting in rooms coming up with, some magical crystal balls that they're speaking into Sephiroth and breathing into them, and then doing some Illuminati magic, and they have the world under spell. That's not what they have. All they did is take the spiritual and secular formulas that were left by the Moors in Islam and copy. That's it. That's all they did. So now it goes right back to law. First rule is everybody has to have a just sanctums. Bloodlines. So what do? We steal the doctrine from these black people, and then we call ourselves Jews. So now we're going to become the people of God. And we're going to affect the whole thing. And we don't care who says what. Now, okay, yeah, y'all going to figure it out that all this is talking about y'all. So what? We're still going to say this is. Now, by positioning ourselves that way, and we must get people to believe it. We have to impress us upon, we have to come up with strategies, we have to sit at home and talk about it. Now we got a bloodline. We made one out of thin air. Now with that bloodline, we're going to go to the other right, which is just solely. Just solely is rights to the soil. Here's where they trick you at. What do they mean, rights to the soil? Rights to the soil means your activity on the soil. What are you doing? So are they doing magic in a room, doing magic? No. Now let me explain to you what they've done. This word right here first shows up being used by Jews in the 13th century in Spain. And you have books like the Zohar and others where this book is being used. This word is being used. Now, at least, as the Jews claim to be from the 1st century AD, that means that within 13 centuries they should have this system recorded somewhere prior to them using it in Spain and coming up in the Zohar book. They don't have it. So, where does it come from? It comes from the Moorish text, because it's a Moorish system. Now, what does the word mean, and where is it at? This is for your study, because some of the Muslims are following the Pale Arabs and they started their Ramadan today. All right? They started their Ramadan today. And they're only doing that because of ignorance. Okay? And that's okay. You got to destroy ignorance with light. All right. The first time this word shows up amongst the Muslims, or the Muhajir, or the names that were used at the time, is in this text. It shows up in this text. I'm going to give you the ayat that it shows up. Surah 2, verse or ayat 143. Just for your study reference. Now, what do the Jews say Kabbalah means? They say it means to receive. To receive something. To invoke or to receive. In the Quran, I'm going to read something from Muhammad Ali about his breakdown of this word. This word is, in Islam is called Qibla, which is a mispronunciation. You should put all of the fatahs in it, and it would be Kabbalah. So the word first shows up in the Quran, in the Moorish text. It doesn't show up in the Jewish text, and it has 600 plus years of existence prior to the Jews even using it. It was showing up in the Moorish text. What does it mean? I'll just read his interpretation. Qibla means the direction or point towards which one turns his or her watch, face. That's the Qibla. Now in conventional Islam, the Qibla is the direction that you turn towards the prayer. So everybody's supposed to pray towards what? Mecca. Right? Well, that's what they do. That's what they do. I'm not saying that's what supposedly, that's what they do. Now, why is this instructional in Moorish history? Because your face, your watch, is your attention. That's where your focus is. And your attention and your focus is where you're displacing your energy. All right? So, it is a sacred science of divinity, because wherever one is directing their willpower, their attention, their focus, that is what expands and becomes reality. All right? So it is a metaphysical science and a physical science. It's real. All right. So, what is to be said about where one turns their face to? Where one gives their attention? Let me break something down for you real quick. Because what the Jews have done, along with their partners, because they're all the same people, is they have spooked you the hell out, taking you away from your real science, and having you following everything other than reality. So much so that you think they're in a room in Hollywood who doing an Illuminati spell on everybody. But look at what your ancestors were. Look at what they. Now, if Qibla means where someone places their face or their watch, let's put the word down, put the transliteration, so you'll see it. This word means face. And it implies attention, focus, and will, watch. Right? Look at what it says in your ancestors' literature. And Allah's is the east and the west. So wherever you turn, wherever you turn is Allah's watch. Wherever you turn, this is Surah 2, verse 115. Now, why am I telling you this? Because in order for the Moors to get their people, or to get a critical mass of people to overthrow the Roman government, they had to de-smooth the population at the time. Because we was believing in all kinds of things, just like we believe in all kinds of things now. All right, following the Romans after their little white curly-headed son. Some of you following them right now. It's okay. You don't know them better. That's a model. His name is Caesar Borgia. He's a model. He's a 14th century model. And they gave that iconic figure to take away your attention from where you need to be focusing. Because according to what they gave you as a perception, all of your greatness, all of your reward is going to come after you die. So don't worry about doing nothing here. This is hell. This is the dunya. Come on, let's speak your language. This is the dunya. And in the dunya, you know, we just trying to get to where we're trying to get to Jannah, to paradise. And in paradise, we're going to be spirits, and we're going to have silk, we're going to have grapes, we're going to have couches, and we're going to sit our spiritual bodies on couches with grapes and silk on forever. All right, hold on. So now, check it out. Let's go back for the spook people in here. Your ancestors said, they didn't say just pray to the east. It said, and Allah is the east and your west. So now we get all the directions. Is out. All right. So wherever you turn, there is Allah's watch. It didn't say wherever Allah turns. It said wherever you turn, there is Allah's watch. Face. So let's just stop the spookiness. We need to stop it. All right? This book is not teaching you about spookiness. All right, let's keep going. Are the Jews running an Illuminati ritual on us? Or are we running it on ourselves? Look at what it says. Verse 142 on the Qibla. I'm going to read this because I'm coming to a point about government. You might say you're going a long way to get to government. Hold on. I'm talking about these Jews now. They got you in the ritual, and they're running all of the trust funds, the contracting templates. They got their Qibla, they got their Kabbalah in order. They got their face, their attention on reality. They got you looking at something else, the okey doke. So look at what the Quran says. It says, the fools among the people will say, quote, what has turned them from their Qibla, which they had? Say, the east and the west belong to Allah. Allah guides whom He pleases to the right path. Thus, we have made you an exalted ummah, nation. Now, they're telling the group who's fighting against the Romans, overthrowing them, now you're an exalted ummah. You're an exalted nation. Ummah means nation. What's making you exalted? That you may be bearers of witness to the people, and that the Rasul, the messenger, may be a bearer of witness to you. And we did not make that which you had to be a Qibla, but that we might distinguish from those who follow the messenger from him who turns back upon his sins. So what are they saying? They're saying, where's your attention? Where's your attention? Where are you focusing your energy? Where are you focusing your will? If you're in Jahiliyyah, ignorance, you focusing your will all kinds of places. You're supposed to be in the meeting, you're running and chasing white girls.
Okay.
You're supposed to be in the free class, getting ready for questions to nationals and doing those things. You're running around trying to get some kind of scheme on somebody or something. All right? Where's your Qibla? Where's your watch? What are you directing your attention towards? So, when we come back here to the Qibla, what we find, this is a technical point now, what we find, and I wrote this in the book that I'm bringing out next week, what we find is that the early or the first temples in Islam did not face Mecca. They faced the rising and the setting of the sun. specifically at the solstices. So now they have taken an astronomical and solar-based science and turned it into facing a place over there, you know, so you can focus, everybody got to turn to method, all right, and base method. But the book is saying something different. So what I'm trying to show you is the Pale Arab and the Pale Jews have heisted your systems. So now they're running everything. They're downtown, they got a multi-million-dollar mosque that they just built downtown. All right. They're doing all these things. And all they want you to do is come in and pray. You're not on the board. You're not running the stocks. You're not running the investment pools for it. You're not running any of those things. Your job is to come in and pray and go to gym. Go to heaven. That's your job. All right? So now, check it out. Erase this real quick. The Kabbalah that the Jews are running is not, I quote, is not an Illuminati ritual. The Kabbalah that they're running is how to take your will and divert it into resources for themselves. That's it. How do we turn you into a resource for ourselves? That's it. So the question that we have to ask is, how do we turn ourselves into resources for ourselves? And the amazing answer comes up, we go right back to where we started. If you're not going to govern yourself, then these folk are going to govern. They're not even going to govern you under the organic de jure law. This is what they're going to do. So I'm not going to go through Sephiroth and 32 paths and give you your gematria for your name. You know what that's supposed to be done by? What that's supposed to be done by? That's supposed to be done by your mother, so she could tell the world how you're going to fit into the society. Your mother is supposed to know all the astrosciences. That's why they keep showing you solar positions and energies and all that. She's supposed to know those to say, oh, this is going to be our engineer right here. This is going to be our banker. This is going to be our doctor. This is going to be our architect. This is going to be, he has all the energy. She has all the, they're supposed to do that. All right. So what did, check this out now, what did they do inside of the Ummah in here? They said, well, the Christian format is that you have a single man with no wife as the model man. And we're going to call him the S-O-N. All right? So, you know what that is? If you follow that, see, they lace it with tricks, so they take some of your ancestors' stuff, and he's saying all this fly stuff, right? Yeah, Jesus is saying a whole bunch of fly stuff in the Bible. But what we don't know is that he's only a caricature. We, from some of your ancestors' wisdom and knowledge, but then there's another Zeusian psychosis that's laced with it. So that's why Master Prophet Muhammad called it the poison book. He said it's the poison book because now you have truth mixed with falsehood. Now you know what happens to somebody who is sincere? When they hear the truth, they just throw themselves all into it. And they never get the venom. They get it, but they get laced with it. And it's too late. By that time, they got all the sisters in the church saying there's no other name. All right? So they took your emphasis off the S-U-N. See, this son right here is going to be crucified. All right? So it's telling you he's going to die for your sins. He's going to turn the other cheek. What you start realizing is, wait a minute. There's something wrong with this. Say it again? Yeah. Oh, bro, don't you say that. We have to learn to sacrifice for one another. No. sins of people who are trying to set them up. Right? Turn the other cheek. And be crucified from a bunch of people who don't want to listen to you anyway. So when we start following that model, we fall into it's a trap. All right? It's a very shrewd trap too. Because you start thinking you're doing a good thing. Right? You got to sacrifice for the people. You know, black power. You got to love your people, brother. You don't love the people, brother. You sacrifice. Come on now. Don't you get this? You get this. Now, there is a level of understanding and comprehension that is needed to understand our people's condition, and patience, and all of that is real. It is a real virtue. But you're not going to go in the street and die for some niggas who don't care about you. Who does that? The Son. So now, if he becomes your model, now, you have a problem. So, what did the Moors do? See, I mean, what did the people, they're really smart. They said, look, the Greeks and Romans have taken one of our prophets and they recreated it. So we got to make sure when we write the literature that we make sure we make a clarification, a point of clarification. So Prophet Isa in the Quran is not the same person as Jesus in the Bible. You can look at the history, the lineage, when he was born, and that's a point of clarification. I'm not going to go into that, but that's important. But they focus you on the single man, no wife, who's a bum. When you were supposed to be focusing on science and life and principles, studying nature, understanding these particular things. So if you study the sun, all right, the sun is maintaining 9 planets in order, all right? Responsibility. Everything is together. So why take you off of that to focus on a hybrid story? Because we want to supplant you away from activating your power. So now, you're over here, you look at most of the population of African American men, they're single, with no wife, and they're turning other types of cheeks now. All kind of cheeks being turned. All right? Because the implication is, if your Savior is single, then you know, that's the highest level. Why not be like the Savior? And be single. So this stuff can go a long way. All right? And then they got the Muslims, because now the Muslims are waiting on this person to come back and break the cross and kill the swine. In the way that they understand. All right? Which is just crazy. Meanwhile, these people over here practicing the Bible, they got this. They got the banks. They got the trusts. And they even put, in God we trust. Then they say, everything is based on what? The full faith and credit. Check it out. Look at what they did. They took faith, which is supposed to come from tradition and religion, and they moved it into commerce and government. So now the whole society is based on faith that these people are going to do what they're supposed to do. And what they have done is they have diverted all of the wealth to them as trustees. They're trustees over your wealth. All right? So now what are we saying? In indigenous government, we're saying a few things. We're saying, how did they do it? They fooled your mom. She's in fear. She's under threat, duress, and coercion. She's in the hospital, and she turns you over as property through a birth certificate. The certificate is a financial instrument. Who set this up? The Dutch West India Company was the first company to do bonding and insurance contracts, insurance on the slave ships, and bonding contracts when they got to the land. So if you came through Charleston, and you coming from Senegambia, you got to the port in Charleston, they had some papers, they filled them out, they branded you, they got to find a way to keep the property, they put you on the block, and they sold you. And those papers followed you everywhere you went. Until you either broke free, or you were manumitted, or you were a slave for life. One of the three. So now your papers are following you everywhere.
Break it down.
All right? They follow you everywhere, right? You don't own the papers. How do you know you don't own them? Because every time you own a copy, you got to pay for it.
That's the truth.
It's your birth certificate, but you got to pay for a copy from the state. It ain't yours. It's not yours.
It's certified though.
Certified. There you go. It's certified. So now look, check it out. So now the Dutch West India Company, all the companies that set up, they set up themselves to do what you give you what you have, which is what time is it? Lineal wealth. Lineal based wealth. All right. What are you going to hand down to your children? Food stamps? WIC? Snap cards? What you going to hand down to them? I'm asking a serious question. How can you hand down anything to your children? What happened to our wealth? All right? Look. So you start out with this birth certificate. Then they take you to the next one, Social Security card. And what are they doing at each time? This is what they're doing. You pay into Social Security and you work it. They tell you, yeah, 65, we're going to give it to you. Meanwhile, we're taking the money and we're converting it to assets for ourselves. All right? We don't need Social Security. That's for you. What we have is, we have all these trust funds, and our children and our children's children can live off them perpetually. So they're taking their Kabbalistic science of the manipulation of the human will and converting it into assets for themselves. So this is why they don't want you to even think this right here. Because the thing this right here, you can take back all your wealth. All right? Imagine if your woman is not working at Home Depot for them under his help. The owner of Home Depot has to help. And all these little women here working for him, they're on his ID. Right? So, does everybody know what full faith and credit means? You see that sometimes on documents. If you go to New York State bonds, you see it. Full faith and credit. You know what that means? That means that whatever the state does as a fictitious entity, their trustees will pass down the obligations to you so that they could run an operation. And that operation is ran, everybody's paid up front, everything is paid up front, and the only job of the trustees is to figure out the most manipulative, slick, crazy way to enforce repayment to the bondholders. And they can do that through trust resolution. You know what trust resolution is? When a trust is formed, you can make resolutions from the trust. The resolutions are the laws that guide the trust. So, what's the trust over here? The Constitution. What's your position as far as resolutions is concerned? Your position is that you are subject property, 1868, 14th Amendment. Second-class citizens. The first citizens came in 1791. The second-class citizens came in 1868. When your ancestors fought, they fought as non-citizens for some type of freedom. Then groups of pale people got together who were foreigners to this land and foreign to you and said, we'll give you something. They gave you citizenship. And ever since then, we've been hustling and bustling with no resources. So what are we saying to our faith? Our faith is creating credit. That's my point. Your faith is making people wealthy. Literally. An example of this is, if you go to get a mortgage, all right, you don't know that you are an investor and not a receiving a loan. You're an investor. How do we know you're an investor? Because when you sign the document, it's just a piece of paper. They take it and they endorse it over to themselves as a check. And the reason why they can do that is they're not endorsing it to the individual selves as a check. They're endorsing it to themselves as a business. So I'm trying to say that anybody who has a business can create collateral. This is instructional for you, because you start businesses. Anybody who creates a business can create collateral. And then what do they say? Oh, they're real slick. They'll say, we just need to know whatever type of, they might be a bank themselves. They can do this as they're a bank. But if they're not a bank, then they can go and take that instrument and cash it out as an obligation to you. So now, millions of people got subprime loans and millions of people got foreclosed on. The government gave over $32 billion to banks to help the people with their mortgages. The banks took $32 billion. They got the investors who had invested with them. They put out insurance on them, didn't give the money to the investors. So they got insurance, they got the money from the government, then they foreclosed on your house. They got all three areas. And this is all based on signatures and contracts. Think about this now. Every day, right now, somebody is getting rich because you haven't declared yourself, you haven't canceled certain contracts, and you haven't made claim to those things that you own. Whatever used to be owned by your said corporate fiction is yours. Everything, all of it. If you can find it. All right? As we get more specific, let's say you had Social Security money and you want to get Social Security. You could get that money. It's in tranches, it's been illegal transfers, it's been endorsements put on it, none of them with your consent. You put in the money under a fiction. All right? Once you become the beneficiary of everything that was owned there and you have a status, you can make a claim for everything you own. All right? We can all do it. We can do it as a group. All right? But the issue is we have to do it. We have to do it under group sovereignty. There is no such thing as individual sovereignty. That's the problem. That's our complex issue that we have. We're striving to execute individual sovereignty. All right? So all the brothers in here, as you look out at your communities and you see what's going on, and your women and your children have become vassals in the fiction, what you gonna do? How you gonna get them back? No group of men on the planet will allow what we have allowed to go on. You walking down the street and you can't even claim your own women and children. They belong to another man. Just think about that for a second. Some of you gonna go home and your woman belong to another man. The white man. Yeah. All right? Because if you get mad at her and she got that snap card, she gonna snap out on her. Well, I don't need you. I got 3 cards. I got a whip card here, I got a snap card. I got all kinds of cards here. Right? What I need with you? All right? So that's the attitude that has been superimposed upon our people. Right? How do we get out of it? We can't get out of it claiming to be Moors and don't know nothing about Islamic science. All right? Or heritage. Or history. The last question that I'll raise is this, and this is really simple. This is really simple. How do we help ourselves get out of this condition? How do we help ourselves get out of this condition? It has to be a holistic plan, right? But the key word is plan. Plan, and the other part of that is strategy. You cannot remain in low self-esteem and come in here and be functional. I'm going to say that again. You cannot remain in the capacity of low self-esteem and come in here and be functional. You're not going to be functional. What is low self-esteem? Low self-esteem is lack of awareness of your own power. That's all it is. And the things that have been engendered into your mind to block you from power through perception inducement. All right? What you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do. That kind of inducement. So, government, oh, you can't do that. Homeland Security is going to label you as a domestic terrorist. And you're going to get locked up. They're going to, matter of fact, Ali Muhammad, they're going to send you to Guantanamo Bay. You ain't scared? Hell. All right? So now, fear. There you go, that's fear. Fear is the thought or the idea that you're in a good position, so you don't want to threaten that position of goodness that you're in. Messing with those crazy indigenous people.
Mess up the benefits.
Right? You don't want to mess it up. All right? So, self-esteem. You have to be confident in yourself. How do you build confidence in yourself? Experience with challenging yourself. You have to challenge yourself. Challenge yourself to think outside of this little box that you've been put in. All right? Then you have to discipline yourself. See, all this is self-imposed.
Study.
Yes. All right? Yes, we got to remove ignorance. All right? Then you have to learn to work together efficiently. And here's where we have our greatest challenge. Working together efficiently means you're bringing something to the table. And sometimes people feel like they don't have nothing to bring to the table. So when they start working together, they start arguments or they start the crabs in the barrel syndrome. Because they don't feel like they're a part. So when someone doesn't feel like they're a part, then they either retract themselves away from it or they just get busy destroying it. So working together efficiently is knowing the goal and the vision. What is the vision? If we have a vision to operate government, we have to know what government is. Government is the science of executing the mind. Govern, which is execution. Ment, which is the mind. So now, we have to be productive. All right? Why are you around people that are unproductive? Why are you around people that gossip all the time? Why are you around people that every time they open your mouth, they're saying something negative? Why are you around people who are always into self-implosion? Why are you around them? Change your environment. All right? So, the last 2 points I want to make, yeah, we got time. The last 2 points are when you come back to this Kabbalistic system, check it out. Check it out. Check it out real quick. When you come back to it, we'll give you something so you can take on the study. When you come back to this Qibla, that's in Islam, it tells you, check it out, it denotes or destroys the idea that you have to pray in a certain direction. The Qibla or the Salat is the thought. How you're directing your thought and your attention. Yes. So as you're directing your thought and your attention, check it out. It gives you this. I put this on the board all the time. We went over this a few weeks ago. It gives you this. This is called Tamaniya. Tamaniya. Thamaniya means 8. Hanaya, Anan. An. This was the sacred knowledge that was also called the knowledge of the lotus tree, or the Sufis called it Sidrat, which means tree, Muntai, the sacred tree, tree of life. All right, the tree of life. What's interesting about the shape, check this out. All right, what's interesting about the shape that the Sephiroth are in, there's something interesting about this shape. If you double it, it's in the shape of a dodecahedron. Everybody know what a dodecahedron is? It's a 12-sided, and I have this in the PowerPoint, I just didn't have it. It's a 12-sided shape. 12-sided shape. Dodecahedron. Qibla, or Kabbalah. Why is it a 12-sided shape? Because water takes on two forms when it's in the body as the hydrogen molecules come together. It takes on dodecahedron shape and icosahedron shape in living tissues. Now we know that water is considered what? One of the most important elements for life. So when you're studying the science of the Qibla, you have the sun focus, and then you have water as a focus. Now we're getting into elemental science. Water, important to all biological life forms. Sunlight, important to all biological life forms. Put the sun right here. That's our element fire. And then we have water right here, H2O. That's being used. Now, in the body, in the human body, when the body is suffering from body drought, you know what body drought is? Body drought is dehydration. When the body is suffering from body drought and dehydration, the electrical and the chemical operations are lessened or shut down. And the body cannot carry out its anatomical, physiological processes properly. A hydrated body, the only body that's hydrated is a body that's eating living foods. Now, in physics, this is called attenuation. I'm about to get into it. Want to know what attenuation is? If I make a sound, boop, in air, sound travels at 1,120 feet per second. All right. If I make a sound in water, the sound travels faster. Why is the sound traveling faster in water than through the atmosphere? Anybody got any idea? Say it again? It's in a medium. It's in a medium. Okay. And what else? What else do we have here? Water is a conduit that causes acceleration of that vector. Causes it to accelerate by. All right? So now, what am I saying? That sound, electricity, whatever. Water, as an element, is the prime element of life. In the Quran, this is called al-ma'a. Like you say, ma'at. Ma'at is the feminine, but when you draw that sickle, it's ma'at. It represents life. So the whole Kabbalistic system is about attenuation. What is attenuation? Attenuation is the ability to absorb energy, right? And keep that energy as a source of power. All right. Melanin. What is melanin? It's carbon, I'm coming to something now, compounds. Carbon compounds. Compounds of carbon, compounds of hydrogen, and compounds of oxygen. All right? So when you look at a cell in the body, the skin is a reflection of the brain. When you're looking at the skin, you're looking at an external brain. So when we have melanin, which is called melanosomes, which is a collection of carbon compounds that are being combusted by oxygen inside of water, all right, we have an electrical operation that's taking place there, a magnetic and electrical operation. What does that do? That attenuates that body to communication, higher forms of communication, which means it's more intelligent. That's what I'm trying to do. It's more intelligent. It's coming to you. So, what does it mean to be more intelligent? To be more intelligent means that you have more creative capacity. So when you look at our people, you look at how brilliant they are, even in the state that they're in, we have to ask ourselves a question. What will happen when we all start this group resonance where we're sharing these ideas, contract, commerce, spirit, when they become more safe? What's going to happen? We open up these channels, all right, and we become more creative. In fact, we start realizing that we are the creator. When you talk about the creator, you're talking about a being and an action. All right? But what most of us don't want to come to grips with is we're always creating, right? But we don't like what we create. So we throw it on an invisible being so that we can be irresponsible, so that we live in the world of effects instead of the world of causation. Because if we come to the conclusion that we are creating our own hell or heaven, that's a hard thing to come to grips with. Because then we all have to look at each other and say, damn, we did this to ourselves, and to the greatest extent. You see what I'm saying? That's the highest level of responsibility that we can come to. So when we study the science of directing energy, we study the elements, all right? We placed ourselves at the center, and in studying creation, we are able to synthesize reality. That's my point. So if I tell you, look, so we can use nature now. If I tell you that the white man is the devil, you say, Brother Ali, you hate white people. You're unbalanced. Right? And I say, well, since we both have an opinion, let's take it to the system. And what I'm telling you is that you can get mad at me all you want and say whatever you want to say. But when I say the white man is the devil, I'm identifying him as a problem on the planet, an unnatural problem on the planet. I'm not going to argue whether Yaqub made him or not. What I'm going to say is that we can measure this. So if we don't have a system that encourages the bloodlines to stay as they are, and you start mixing bloodlines and you say it's cool because we all love each other, and you know this is about freedom of expression and all of this bullshit that you talk about, I can take you right to the sun. And the white folks have the experiments themselves. They use technical words like sunburn cells and all those other things, but they're telling you that they're anti-solar. So if they're anti-solar biologically,
They're anti-solar psychologically. They're anti-solar socially. They're trying to block out the goddamn sun through experiments. What do we look like? Not necessarily insulting them. We don't have to do that. But what do we look like not labeling a spade a spade? You see what I'm saying? Our people back then didn't have a problem with it. You can't even get through this book without, if you can read it properly, without saying that the authors of it must be racist. All right? They could have said that the first man was just a man, or the first woman is just a woman. Why give the focus on them as Ham? Are they racist? All right? Then when you go through our tree, we can show you. As an agriculturalist, what I know is that when you introduce higher levels of ammonium or nitrogen into the soil, you deplete the power of the plant to germinate properly, and you deplete the heirloom nature of the seeds. Those are called amine groups, or ammonia. If I take a blood test from a European and I look at his erythrocyte, I'll see something called an ammonia transport system. Which says that they have higher levels of ammonia in their body, which says they have less levels of water, which says they have less levels of intelligence. That's innate. I didn't make that. Whoever made that way as a signal. If I take you into a body to show you a cancer cell, the cancer cell is devoid of melanosome carbon compounds, and every polyp or cancer in the body is pale. It's pale and it's anaerobic. You know what that means? It lacks oxygen receptors because it doesn't want oxygen. So thus you have white folks burning up all the carbon fuels. All right? Which, when they say they're burning up carbon, what they're telling you is, are fossil fuels. The only things that are in nature that become fossilized, that turn into those carbons or those oils, are the plant life and the people who used to be here. So they're literally burning your ancestors in your cars. You ain't paying attention to this, what's going on. All right? So all I'm saying is we can go to our tree of life and see who is natural here and see who is not. Our only problem is a knowledge of self. That is it. When you leave black folk to be amongst themselves, they're naturally righteous. You put them in here with white folks, they're so naive that they become susceptible to these things because they have not identified them. Once you identify the external aspect, you can identify the internal trigger. And you can make sure that that trigger is discipline. So when we're here, you can't charge nature with racism. My point is, racism is bullshit. It's an illusion. Like, why are we even using these words? We're using these words because we don't have a system of measurement. We don't have to talk about race at all. We don't have to mention it. That can be our private conversation in our own home. But when we come out, our children already know. When the white man sticks his hand out, you say, "Oh, I don't shake hands." I don't know if you watch your hands.
I'll just scratch your butt with it.
Yeah, anything. All right? Well, what I'm trying to say is white people have a private conversation. That's what I'm trying to say. Not all of them, but most of them. They have a private conversation that goes on in their homes. They come out and they participate in the public, and you think that that's your friend at your job. Because y'all sit beside each other in a cubicle. But my point is, what is your private conversation in your home? Most of us don't have one. Your private conversation is about who got the biggest ass on BET. All right? Or some crazy idea that's going on in your mind.
I got a question.
Oh, no, come take it. She's like, my arm is hurting, brother. I'm saying we have a way of measuring. We should not be undisciplined. There's no reason to hate anybody. There's no reason to be undisciplined. But there is a reason to understand where we are in time and space and systems of measurement. We can go a lot further with this. I want to stop and take questions. Yes, ma'am. You're first.
All right. You mentioned that the crackers, they're calling white people, the Caucasian, to be politically correct, but crackers, because I feel calling it that, that the crackers have ammonia in the system.
Ammonia transport.
Yeah, so what about like those mixed kids that, you know, that when they enter marriage, does that child get that trace also?
It
Or
depends. Yeah, it depends on if the gene went through transcription and translation, which simply means that they got the gene and if it's turned on or not. All right.
So how would that child?
I'm gonna give you some technical knowledge so you can do some research. RH factors. There are two types of RH factors. All right. This is the ones that you need to look up: AAG and CCG, or AAG through CCG. This deals with the ammonia transport system. When you look this up, you can just Google this. They'll have a lot of information on Google. All right, this deals with the ammonia transport system, whether the red blood cell has the ability to transport amine sugars into its cellular matrix, whether it has receptors for it. Right? And the determination factor is whether father or mother is of certain haplogroups. When we say white people, like you said, it's haplogroups F through T, which are Europeans.
Oh, FT is a European?
F through T. These are haplogroups. A through T are haplogroups. A and B are African. C, Mongolian. D and E are the Euro-Asians that we call Persians and Arabs. And then F through T are Europeans. So you have haplogroups where you have matrilineal lines, patrilineal lines. So if a white man and a black woman come together and have a child, then this child is going to have these red blood cell receptors that have the ammonia transport. And that's going to affect them psychologically. I'll give you an idea of how it can affect. When you have serial killers who are off, what you will find out is that if you test the tissues, the gray matter tissues in their brain, they have high levels of glutamate. Glutamate is an ammonia-based neurotransmitter. Ammonia-based neurotransmitter. So the more ammonia you get in your brain, the crazier you get. And you have a whole lot more in their brain. Right? And you get very that's a diet and other things. Yes, sir.
Like I said, the mother has a child. How can I, as a more, how can I get custody of the children through that?
If the mother has a child and she's not, let me say this, rewind. As a Moor, you're supposed to be a part of a political jurisdiction, which means that there's no one who's a Moor just floating as a Moor. You're that by bloodline, but in order to get the protection, you need to be a part of the group. So that's the first thing. So if you're part of that, and she's not, and you have a child with her, and she goes and gets that birth certificate, you're going to have to negotiate with her, because now she has bonded that particular child into the system. You can try to sue her to have the rights of the child expressed, but what venue are you going to do that in is the question. All right? Are you going to pull her into the political jurisdiction of your courts that are ran by you? Are you going to sue her in federal court on an international issue? If you handle it in domestic state courts, they're almost never going to give you any rights. So that becomes a complex issue. And this is what I always tell people. If you have a son or daughter with a woman, try negotiation first. Negotiation first, because the mother, if she is in that corporate fiction capacity, she's going to do all the stuff that creates the paperwork trail for that child to exist in. And until y'all come to a private agreement where you can use that to some type of public force in their venue, you're kind of stuck. Because the child is there and it's under the paperwork.
What about if it's switch around, if it's like you're more woman and you marriage.
Don't have the same thing.
Same thing?
Instructional, what did Jews say? I'm only going to marry another Jew. They know. Because even if we divorce, we still have some kind of reciprocal understanding that if we have wealth, then most of the time we can keep it in the family instead of creating a disaster. So we should only be marrying people who are in our genetic pool, one, and then two, you should only be marrying people who have the same value system. So if you're a brother and you're in a strip club, and you go find a woman in a strip club, you try to change her into 100% righteousness, you're going to have no problem. Because she's going to be like, well, you met me in the club, so I'm going to go back to the club. You stuck. You see what I'm saying? So we gotta change the way we meet people. But we meet people where they at, and they usually stay there. Did I answer your question? Was that clear? You're not stuck.
I guess you ain't never stuck.
You see, let me go back. See, communication, the power. Say it again. Communication and negotiation. See, sometimes we put in our mind that we can't talk to people, and that might only be a temporary thing. Right? Every woman, let me say this to all brothers, every woman is approachable. If you had a child with a woman, that means she let you in.
Yeah, literally.
All right? So don't tell me you can't have a conversation with her because you had more than a conversation. So she's approachable. You have to gain the emotional poise to know when is the best time. You might be arguing with her right now. Fall back. Wait till she calms down. All right? You might even have to go buy her something nice and be nice to her. You know what I mean? Do something, and she might feel like you're trying to get back at me. No. I don't want nothing. I want to talk about our child. Do something. We have to understand human psychology. When people are angry with you, they're angry with you for a reason, whether you agree with them or not. So when you try to battle with them about what the issue is and try to make yourself right and them wrong, you already lost. You have to understand where they are emotionally, and you have to understand how to approach them, especially if you have a child, because you're trying to accomplish something that's for the good of the child. So you just got to slow down, take your time, and then realize, okay, the person is approachable. All right? If you have a child with a woman, you're taking care of the children, you're doing your part, then you have a better leeway in. You see what I'm saying? If there's argument about that, we have to figure out how to man up in that area to get to the other part of the conversation. And women have been put in a position to have way more influence where Europeans are dominating our society. So they do that. They make them feel like they can always call them. You know what I mean? They'll push the child support button on you in a minute. But we have to recognize where we are, what we engage in, because that's a contract. The contract produces offspring. So now you're responsible for that, and you just gotta carry your emotional poise to the point where you can approach them. And then when you approach them, and you get the leverage, if they see you living a certain type of lifestyle under that capacity, then they might be more prone to say, yeah, you know what? Yeah, I want my child to learn that. Because look at what it did for you. You got 3 trust funds and now you're a millionaire. I want my child to have some of that. You know what I mean? So it's about performance. And by that time, you get the child over to your jurisdiction and cancel all of those contracts. But you have to take your time and plan out what you want to do and think about it. You see what I'm saying? Most people come in and they learn, oh yeah, then can I do an affidavit to stop her from, no, don't think like that. Think like, what is my plan and what do I want to accomplish? You don't want to make the child an object of war. All right? So if you want more time with the child, if you want the child to come out of that corporate status, put together a plan. She don't got to know all of it. You know what I mean? But you can put together something.
And also, communicate with brothers that are in, relationships.
Right.
And if there's sisters communicate with sisters that are in relationships.
That's the biggest part.
That's
You
the
know what I mean?
that's the part.
That's where you learn. You know what I mean? That's where you learn everything. And this is why we should have more intimate interactions with each You know what I mean? That comes from just doing it. Matter of fact, announcement real quick. If anyone wants to come down to Philly, we're doing a celebration for the fast that we were just on, and we're doing a food extravaganza this Sunday coming up. So if you want to take some time out, come get some living food, all types of different things. We're going to be at Songhai. I'll write this down and let. You got your hand up?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Joel. I'm gonna write this address down just in case anybody wants to come on Sunday. We're having a food extravaganza. So if you know people who are transitioning, who want to get into the living foods eating systems, we're gonna be there. And yeah, we're gonna have people coming in who've been participating in transitional dietary practices, and they're having testimonies and everything they have to put.
Yesterday, we was talking about the Kabbalah and relationship to water and relationships. You were speaking on that. Can you elaborate a little bit further?
Yeah, okay, absolutely. Let me write this down. Songhai Cultural Center, and I'll come to that, because that was a big point. 3117 Master Street, and that's in Shaker Maxim, also known as Philadelphia. That's Philly. CA, if you put it in GPS, 19121. It's going to be there from 12:30 until whenever we do. All right, yesterday this is my last one. I'll make this my last one. Yesterday, I was talking about the solar basis of Ramadan and the Qibla system and the early mihrab. The mihrab is the place in the temple or the masjid or the mosque where the imam is facing that gives the direction of prayer. And the early mihrabs that the Moors built were facing the winter solstice, sunrise and sunset. And they did that because the original Ramadan was based on an earlier system of fasting that took place and led into the winter solstice. So it was solar and astronomical based. And in using the Qibla system, with the focus on the sun and water, water represents relationships. How we form relationships. It represents intimacy, the intimacy of our emotions. It represents a woman. Here we have the sun. We know that represents the father. Even though it has feminine attributes, it's generally looked at as the prime masculine attribute. Fifth polarity, Leo. All right? So now we have the father energy married to the mother energy. All right? We have one that is a receiver, and we have one that is extroverted. It is giving energy. Giving energy, receiving energy. All right? So this is the marriage of man and woman in the Kabbalistic system. Now, when you look at marriage and how we perceive it today, it is complete bull. The idea of people coming together to spend $30,000 on a wedding, they have no resources, no church fund set up, no savings, no business plan, is ridiculous. People spend more money on their wedding than they do on their investment in their education in them. And they come out broke. Then they get together and they have no business plan. Imagine if the sun and the water did not have a business plan. We'd be in trouble. They come together based on chemistry. They know each other. They interface to create life. All right? The first seeds on the earth were created from solar energy. And when solar energy gets trapped and coagulates in water, it forms life forms. All right? That's the Genesis. So look at how we're coming together today. We come together under the SOA. That old Zeus psychology. All right? Sisters get this really bad. You look at somebody else's husband, all right, and you don't have a husband, so what do? You go sleep with somebody else's husband. But by default, because the sisters haven't engendered the water principle to work together in a flowing environment, then by default, they cancel out the possibility that they could ever have a sisterhood. By default. And that is the Black Code's teaching. That's the Wilhelmina Lynch teaching. So now, if you look out, sisters, this is women. You look out at other women and you see the state of what's happening to women, and you have no sensitivity, or your sensitivity does not drive you to the intelligent mindset that says that you have to do something to orchestrate how you're going to deal with the matriarchy. All right? What, you're going to leave them under the Greek Zeus system? All right? The Greek Zeus or the Black Code system, there's no maintenance for women. The women just become, you know, the bad word that we call it. All right? So now, in Islam, we had a methodology of dealing with that, a group methodology. It wasn't even just local, it became international. All right? So now you have, that's the Quran. That's Quran. So my point is that how people come together and why they come together in union. We're supposed to be dealing with the science of the intimacy of relationships, and the intimacy is increased when we're productive. All right? When you're successful in relationships, it makes the relationship better. But if you come together for BS, what is it for? Now imagine the average person. You go home, you work 9 to 5. You want to do something because your nature is calling you to do something, but you're too tired. You can't even handle the house chores. Some women can't even go home and keep the house clean because they're so tired. I'm so tired. Why don't you have energy? You don't have energy because the relationship is not being fueled with science and art, with nature, with creation, with natural system. Right? The relationship has to be fueled with communication. It has to be all those things, all those elements have to be there. All right? And you have to have problem-solving mechanisms. How do you solve problems? All right? What happens in this society? A man and a woman get upset, and they are aligned in biogenetics, and then the Wilhelmina Lynch syndrome, or the Willie Lynch syndrome comes up. They have a problem. They call the public policy enforcement. The ones who killed us by shooting us 41 times. Y'all call them as the intercessors to solve the problem? Imagine that. Who wants to be Sean Pepper? Who wants to be Abner Louis? So we have to have a code of conduct. And the science that we're talking about allows us to relax and understand ourselves. Because we are water. We are these things. I don't want you to make you think like you're talking about something else. We are these things. So we have to come up with a better problem-solving system as far as family and structure and why we come together. Last question.
Wait a minute, I have a comment.
Yes, comment.
Yes. I want to do that. It's actually supporting reality that you mentioned some time ago. And that was based around the space travel of this black sister that went in space.
Oh, yeah. Mae Jemison.
Right, and her bones became more dense. Well, ironically, I was listening to the news and they had this white woman. This was recent. I said within the last month, we did the same travel, and the reverse thing happened. Yeah. And she actually mentioned that her bones had become brittle. So I just wanted to mention that because, you know, you can say something, but then once you get the reality of that thing actually taking place, it's a whole new thing. And I don't know when they're going to change her position, but she's going to pop right now.
Yeah. That's deep. That concept itself is deep. Last question.
You stated that the sun is supposed to represent masculine, the water is supposed to be representing feminine. Is that why those people that something called Cancer now, that water with Cancer sign, compared by astrology?
Right.
Cancer sign to moody, even though they're male, and they still got like very really emotional and more like Aries.
Yeah, their sun was in a feminine polarity sometimes, so they'll have, in that sense of their self, which the sun is representing your core self, they'll be more receptive and feminine receptive.
But that's the part I'm facing. My oldest brother, he's a Cancer, and I'm an Aries. I have more of everything in my chart. I have about 12 or 14 something in my whole chart that I did, that I came to do. And I can't reply because everything I said, he got hurt. So I'm trying to, when you mention the water, the sun, and I know I'm a sun sign, and everything about me is sun, everything about me is masculine. I just look like a female, but I mean, I can kick it just like a regular man if I need to. But it's just that, how do I manage to balance since I'm such a son and I have to deal with Cancer?
Well, it's emotional balance important, that's it. Because you might have assertiveness, and he might have introvertedness. It doesn't mean that y'all have to have conflict. You see what I'm saying? You will have the cardinal energy. You have to learn how to exude the energy with the proper level of distance. It can still be assertive. It doesn't have to be aggressive or over-aggressive. You see what I'm saying? And he doesn't have to feel like he's a turtle. You see what I'm saying? He can be receptive and not feel weak. You see what I'm saying? Because those are perceptions that are engendered into people's minds.
But that's what I said. So I don't know how to balance it. So I just stopped talking about it, period, because I can't deal with it. I don't have time for it. I'm too busy focused on.
Yeah, that's gonna be based on y'all communication. How y'all establish communication. If you know you're hurting with something, you stop saying it that way and change the way that you direct energy to it.
I'm too straightforward. I tell like this.
Yeah, but if your sister told me your brother is loving you, you can change it a little.
Killing me here.
All right, we're done. Anybody who wants to come out? Yes. 3117 Master Street. That's Philadelphia, PA. 19121. You'll be in the house 12:30 until. That's on the Sunday coming up. If you're thinking about transitioning in life, we'll have food all over the place so that you can test it and get into it and learn food prep and a whole bunch of other stuff that we have here. All right, we're going to break down this stuff real quick, and if all right, let me break this stuff down real quick, and then everybody